All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Swain Fox, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator for the Center for Urban and Regional Analysis for CURA at The Ohio State University, and excited to welcome you both in person and virtually today to the fourth event of our webinar series, Climate Lessons for Our Cities, Global Perspectives on Climate Change in Urban Environments. This series is co-sponsored by CURA and the Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center, and throughout the series, we've been learning from international scholars and practitioners about the impacts of climate change on cities and the best ways to mitigate and adapt to these effects. So today's guest, Dr. Erin Wilson, will discuss the 5th National Climate Assessment with a particular focus on the Midwest. And Dr. Wilson will unpack the process used to write the assessment as well as the information that it contains. So before we introduce Erin, I just want to mention a few logistical items today. If you're joining in person, you can use the 2 exits in the front of this room to take the hallways with stairs in the corner of the building. And there's men's restrooms out the door to your right and women's restrooms to the door to your left. And there's signage in the hallways to help you get to those. If you're joining online, you can access closed captioning today from the button at the bottom of the screen labeled CC. Click the box, select Show Subtitles, and that'll allow you to view subtitles during the presentation. During the webinar, you can submit questions using the Q&A box. We'll ask as many of those as possible. You can also ask them if you're in person, and we'll get to those, as many of those as we can in the last portion of the presentation. And if we don't get to your question, apologies in advance. The chat's been disabled, so you can use that Q&A function if you have any information to share with the organizers as well. You may have seen on our website, but this event is approved for 1 AICP CM credit. And to claim your CM credits, you can log on to my APA account on the APA website and enter the event info into your online CM event log. At the end of the webinar, if you're attending virtually, there's a brief survey that we'd love for you to fill out. This helps us improve our events through your feedback. If you have additional questions after the event, you can email me at swaim-fox.1@osu.edu. And then finally, to learn more about CURA's future events or to sign up for our monthly newsletter, you can visit cura.osu.edu. You can also like CURA on Facebook, and you can follow us on X, Instagram, and LinkedIn. To learn more about all the research and the programs of the Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center, you can visit byrd.osu.edu, that's Byrd with a Y, where you can look at their social media streams on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. And with that, I'll pass it over to Joe Hildebrand, an intern with Byrd's Education and Outreach team, who will introduce our speaker for today.
Dr. Erin Wilson is an assistant professor, agricultural weather and climate field specialist with the Department of Extension in the College of Food, Agriculture, and Environmental Sciences at The Ohio State University. He is also the state climatologist and principal research scientist at the Byrd Polar and Climate Research Center. Erin's research and engagement focuses on observed changes in temperature and precipitation over recent decades, from a global overview to local changes in Ohio. Erin believes in building strong relationships and collaborations that help meet the goals of our land-grant university and partners across the region by engaging in an open dialogue on the science of climate change and bridging expertise to improve decision-making and effective climate change action.
Push it over. Yeah. All right. So good morning. And it's certainly a pleasure to be here. And on behalf of Byrd, I welcome you to this wonderful center. As Tom's getting things set up here, it has been a little bit of a somber week for some of us here at Byrd. So if it's in your will, thoughts and prayers are welcome for some loved ones that we've lost, both of human and furry type. So if that be your will, that would be fantastic. So today I'm going to kind of unpack the 5th National Climate Assessment and talk a little bit about the assessment, what's in it, and then focus on the Midwest. And, in the introduction, I really do care about bridging and making the connections across expertise and disciplines, because that's really where the action happens and the magic happens is, being able to translate and intersperse and develop products and policies from this stuff. But as you'll see, the National Climate Assessment in and of itself is not policy prescriptive, right? It's policy relevant. And we're going to kind of break that down a little bit, kind of compare, a lot of us here at the university are used to literature reviews or paper reviews and scientific reviews, but an assessment's a little bit different. It's got some additional details or a different way of going at it to really assess the full body of the literature that we're going to focus on. So as soon as we're ready to go, we'll get rolling here. Out of storage.
I think I'm going to make sure it's sharing.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So a little bit about the program. So the U.S. Global Change Research Program. This began as a presidential initiative in 1989. Right. So we good to go? All right. So it's not new, right? This process has been around quite a while. And it's built to be, it's really constructed to build upon report after report and its cycle, right? As we learn more, as we engage more, as we learn about the effects and impacts that we see. So it was mandated by Congress with the Global Change Research Act of 1990. And I'll read this: to assist the nation and the world to understand, assess, predict, and respond to human-induced and natural processes of global change, right? So there's a lot of federal structure here, obviously, overseen by the Subcommittee on the Global Change Research, composed of representatives from a lot of different member agencies. And you'll see there things up here: Department of Ag, NASA, State Department, USAID, NSF. The new one added almost toward the end of our process, which was pretty interesting, was the the Department of Homeland Security. So it was an additional review that we had to undergo toward the end of the process. I also should mention I'm not a representative of USGCRP, right? I'm a university representative. I'm not, as they say, I'm not from the government. I'm here to help, sort of thing. But certainly, there are a lot of agencies involved with this. So again, it has its legislative origins, and I think it's important to talk about the timing. It needs to be timely here. So it's supposed to not occur less frequently than every 4 years. Due to transitions and things with the previous administration, it was delayed, and this timeline was shrunk down quite a bit, a year and a half or so. And we are to prepare and submit, right, to the president and Congress. And this assessment, again, I think these are some key words to remember about a national assessment report. It integrates, evaluates, and interprets the findings and discusses the scientific uncertainties, right? It's our job as the authors to understand what are the uncertainties, the gaps, the knowledge in the findings from the research, but not just research, but gray literature and some other reports that we utilize. It's going to, analyze the effects across all disciplines and all areas, from the natural environment, ag, energy, production use, water resources. The list goes on, and you'll see that in the chapters that are listed in the National Climate Assessment. And it analyzes current trends in the global change, both human-induced and natural, right? And we could talk about that a little bit, but it projects out the major trends for the next 25 to 100 years. And it was kind of curious when we got the review back from the National Academies. They asked, okay, well, what about the last 25 years of that 100 years? Because you're really just talking about 2100, right? So think about that. And I think it was a sort of a collective, oh yeah, 100 years from now, we're talking the first part of the 22nd century, right? The first quarter. So some adjustments needed to be made in terms of those projections. I think that was a moment where it was like, we've been talking about this for a long time, right? We've been talking about this for a long time, and now we're talking about the first part of the 22nd century here in terms of these projections. I think that's really important. So what is an assessment? It's an evaluation of a body of scientific literature, technical knowledge that synthesizes individual studies, right? And as an author group, we had to apply our best professional judgment to bridge uncertainties. Part of that was the consensus building, and that, I think, was the magic of the process. And I actually forgot to state, and I meant to, I sort of, at the very beginning of this, I owe my whole journey here with the National Climate Assessment to Stacy Porter, who was a research scientist here, and she's assistant professor at Wittenberg, who threw my name in the hopper and said, I hope you don't mind, but I think you could do this. And then they asked me to be the lead author. And so I certainly appreciate her for putting my name in. But, as lead author and thinking about building consensus, that was a really cool experience of sitting in a room of diverse authors and really asking hard questions about what are the priorities for the Midwest. How do you even go about defining priorities with such a diverse group of people? And there are a lot of cuts. We only had 10,000 words for the whole Midwest chapter. How do you talk about climate change in just the Midwest in just 10,000 words? And so building that consensus was pretty awesome. Again, the report's to be relevant for policy and decision-making, but not prescriptive to specific interventions. Although what we do, and part of National Climate Assessment, the 5th National Climate Assessment, was to raise or uplift community actions that are taking place in the Midwest. Because there's a lot of action that's taking place, especially at the municipality and the community level, that can provide these examples and case studies moving forward. And again, it's got to be authoritative, right? It kind of is applicable to the laws and policies. It's authoritative, it's timely, it's transparent. You'll find in all the chapters traceable accounts that really list how we got to our, how we obtained our confidence levels, the gaps in knowledge and the research that we considered, and basically suggestions for research moving forward in a lot of cases. And so I think the traceable accounts are an equally important part of this whole report. It's about what we don't know, what we need to build consensus as we work toward NCA 6. So just briefly, when you think about an assessment compared to maybe a literature review, a little bit different audience, decision makers, the IPCC reports, similar. You're looking at the decision makers here, large, varied group, needs to be broad and complex. I think the goal of NCA 5 is for local practitioners to glean and take out the information they need to do that local work. And that, I think, is important when for translators. And I think it's the position I take seriously of helping individual practitioners and co-producing the knowledge and how can we extend it beyond what's in this report, because you're not going to get every detail, right? And so the scope is really a full scope of published literature and recent advancements. And it's certainly essential for communicating key messages. I would argue literature review, you need key messages as well. But again, we wanted to break these down into specific key messages. So several chapters, a lot of chapters in NCA. By the way, it's just a light reading. You can do it over a weekend, 1,600 pages from 650 authors, right? Building consensus. But it's not meant to be digested that way, right? Really, the online version is really where it is. And it's really navigable as well. But there are a lot of chapters here. Many, not just the Midwest chapter, but all of these: water, energy, land cover, land use, forests, biodiversity, all have impacts. Right? They have impacts on our cities. And I know we're geared toward our urban areas, but I think it's also important that urban areas don't exist in a vacuum, right? We're all along this urban to rural gradient, and it's very important to have these conversations, not just within our cities, but also across that gradient. And a lot of it's taking place right here in Central Ohio. Some new chapters: economics, social systems, and justice. NCA 5, very important with social justice and equity, and thinking about BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, the Caribbean islands, Pacific nations, making sure that we've got a good representation of what this country is, right? And then also some focused sections: compound extreme events, Western wildfires, COVID-19, right? This was all during COVID. So there's a whole section on that, supply chains and some indicators as well. And again, the Midwest chapter, which is what we'll focus on, you say Midwest to a group like this, we have 30 different ideas of what the Midwest is, right? And you go to the government agencies and they draw the boundary everywhere, right? Ohio always seems to be on the far east of the Midwest, far west of the East, and far north of the South. We're like right in the kind of hinterlands of the area. We might be the heart of it all, but when it comes to some of the agencies, we're sort of not really kind of tuned in sometimes. All right, so really quick with the overview of the team chapter, just so you know kind of my role. Believe it or not, there are a lot of rules and regulations in the federal government. This Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA, was pretty interesting, to work around, and I'm not going to go into the details, but a lot of the teams consist of either all Fed employees or a mix, and ours is a mix. But during the process of talking to other chapters, if you're talking to all Fed chapter, for instance, right? If you had two non-feds in the room, you were advocating. That's not allowed. So, there are the details about how you can even interact with the authors of other chapters when you're developing the reports. The roles within individual chapters include a federal lead, which is the liaison among the federal employees, really. The chapter lead author, which was my role. We had a number of chapter authors, as you'll see. Other tech contributors, if we had an idea that we wanted to hone in on, like the Healthy Ports Initiative in Lake Erie, or across the Great Lakes, we pulled in Sean Cavanaugh, who was with University of Pennsylvania and with the Healthy Ports Initiative, but others like the MITRE Corp to talk about dams, as you'll see in a second. And then we have points of contact. Samantha Basile was ours, federal contractor, and really was the glue for our entire team. So just about my role was really about directing the day-to-day development of a chapter, leading to a cohesive, consistent, compelling, concise, and clear narrative. And again, through this building consensus kind of way. Ensures author meets deadlines, and then responding to the comments in the review cycle. 7 rounds of review, right? It's extensive. And that includes a public review, several, two public reviews. We had the National Academies review toward the end of that as well, all of the federal agency reviews. And you can see our timeline here, right? It got started in February of 2020, which was a bit late. I came on board 3 years ago in spring of 2021. We had multiple public engagements as well, agency reviews, and all of these reviews. Again, 7 reviews, and we published in November of 2023. So this is the Midwest team, diverse team here, a mix of feds, non-feds, some private institutes. We also had tribal representation here as well. Part of my job as a lead author with the CLA, the federal lead, and the point of contact was choosing the authors. How do you choose the authors? And we had a few in mind, and then we got together, iterated. We suggested more. There were several folks we reached out to who didn't have time that would have brought additional guidance and value to the group. But this is where we were, and I think we had a really strong, fun team here across the whole region. The other awesome thing about the NCA 5 is that there was a push for art. There are a lot of ways to be informed with climate information, and so I wanted to highlight in today's presentation the three selections, the 3 pieces that were selected for the Midwest chapter. This first one is Nikki Way. It's called Snowed, Iced In, and I'm going to read Nikki's statement here. The Great Lakes region is considered a future refuge area against the extreme heat to come. However, there is much uncertainty about the future of our weather. Climate change may bring more intense lake effect snow and ice storms, even as snow and ice cover decrease overall. Our homes, ecosystems, and economies are at risk, and we need to be more prepared. Water levels are already sweeping away homes, mangling infrastructure, and disrupting indigenous traditions. This piece reflects my fear and uncertainty around climate change in the Great Lakes region. I think that's great because for me, we always hear, and one of the things we really approach, and I know you're going to appreciate this, is migration into the Midwest area. What does it mean? And there is still a considerable amount of uncertainty, and we considered that. We deliberated quite a bit and thought that the research and thing was right on the cusp about 3 years ago of being able to effectively include it, but we weren't quite there. So we didn't. But there's this idea that I get in my engagements that the Midwest is immune from climate change, that it's safe, that we're fine. It just looks different in the Midwest than it might look in California and New York. And so I think that's an important message. And I thought this artist captured that. This was on a watercolor collage here. All right, so here's the Midwest summary. In one sentence here, and again, trying to think about how to condense the Midwest down into a few words. But big impacts are from increasing temperatures and oscillations between extreme droughts and extreme floods, and those threaten agriculture, aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems, cultural connections. It increases the risk of individual and community health and well-being. We talked a lot about well-being in our chapter and within our group. It exacerbates racial and socioeconomic inequities in the Midwest and really challenges our ability to manage the major waterways that maintain the flow of goods and services throughout the Midwest in the country. And that's the key, right? We are water rich. beyond our imagination compared to many parts of the country here. And it's part of a benefit, but it's also, you know, we need to be thankful or thinking about that climate change interface through our hydrologic cycle and water. But again, Midwesterners are responding in ways that offer hope for the future. So I'm a physical climate scientist, so I have to talk a little bit about the science, right? I have to talk about that, although most of this room and many people online obviously are well aware of the physical changes. But, you know, we can just look at recent conditions, which are obviously weather, right? And day-to-day variability. But we can't ignore the trends. We can't ignore the scientific facts here. 2023, the warmest year on record since 1850. Right. And what I like to do when I'm out in the communities is I say, okay, raise your hand if you were born after February 1985. And slowly those audiences are getting more and more of the group that are raising their hands. And it's like you've never experienced cooler than average month for the planet. Your entire life has been this. Right. And I think that that's really effective and important. Of course, we updated, you know, the changes in temperature and precipitation from the physical side. And if you look at changes in annual temperature, winter and summer, there are differences. In the Midwest, generally it's amplified as we get closer to the Great Lakes region. So 1/2 to 2 degrees warmer than the early part of the 20th century. Certainly that amplification toward the northern latitudes, as you see in these figures, and strong seasonal differences. As a matter of fact, we deal with right here in Ohio and across much of the Midwest, what we call a summer warming hole. The fact that our daytime highs are we haven't observed a large increase. In many areas, we're seeing a decrease in the daytime highs, but an increase in the overnight lows, right? Which can also have profound effects. But how do you reconcile that with the national communication of warming or even regional? That, you know, these changes in our climate exist at multiple scales, at the global scale, at the regional scale, continental scale, and even at the micro scale. And it's important to keep that in mind. Precipitation has certainly increased over the early part of the 20th century. Right, so we're talking about long-term change here over the last 130 years. Winter precip and summer precip since the early 20th century has gone up. But I will zoom in to, I think, a decision maker framework here in a second to look at the last 40 years, right, and think about just the acceleration and the changes. We know it's accelerated since 1980, and we know that it's not warmed equally everywhere. But if you look at Ohio, certainly, and you rank all years since 1895, 8 of each, top 10 warmest, top 10 wettest, have all occurred since 1990. It's warmer, it's wetter, but the details really matter here. And one of those details is changes in our extremes. And this is an update from the National Climate Assessment, again, kind of highlighting the decrease in the number of days where we're above 95 degrees, right? We've seen a decrease in that today compared to early part of the 20th century. Some of that early part of the 20th century is driven by the 1930s, one of the warmest decades in the United States history, compared to, say, the 70s, which is cooler. Again, you know, these changes don't exist with, you know, aren't in vacuums here. We have to think about the timing and the framework. Cold days, we're certainly decreasing the number of days where we fall below freezing, and warm nights during the summer as well. Every which way you slice precipitation and the intensity of the precipitation, it's increasing. And I often struggle with maps like this. Okay, if I tell you that the total precipitation on the heaviest 1% of days has increased 45% across the Midwest. Charlie Brown, right? Wah, 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 right? It's hard to get those statistics across in a community way. So I think these are good, they're informative, but we have to find ways of expressing this in other ways as well. The maximum 5-year, maximum, all of our daily and even sub-daily frequencies are going up. Another way to look at this, like I said, from a decision maker standpoint, is just to say, okay, well, the National Weather Service has 30-year periods where we say today's high is normally X or Y, right? And every 10 years we update that. And these normal periods that the National Weather Service used were never intended for climate change, right? They came about in about the 1930s and started saying, hey, you know, the last 30 years, it's been like this on this day. What can we expect? But you can take a difference between these two periods, right? Which basically have 20 years of overlapping data, drop off the 80s, add the 2000s, and say, okay, since 1980, how's the annual mean temperature changed here in the United States, right? So certainly Ohio, 1/2 degree to about 1 degree, kind of amplifies as you get closer again to Lake Erie versus other areas. But since 1980, if you just strictly look at that period, right, And this is where we get into that, okay, what period of time are you choosing to talk about long-term trends versus community action around more recent conditions, right? And it's really where that community, not where weather and climate become the same, but where the communication around weather and climate intermix, right? And you have to be really careful about that. But certainly from a decision-making standpoint, we see the annual temperature increase. Winters are getting less severe. And one of the things that we talked about was the disconnect with our cultural traditions, not just our indigenous folks across the Midwest, 35 federally recognized tribes in the Midwest, but how much do Midwesterners value their snow and ice? This past season was a really an important kind of, the warmest winter on record, lack of snow. You think about all the festivals, all of the cultural traditions, and then also when the indigenous folks that people that deal with and are really highly connected, their food systems, their values, their culture, their ceremonies. And so certainly the winter severity is decreasing, but that has big impacts, right, across the Midwest. We can do the same thing for precip, again, updating this or looking at this since 1980. We've seen that increase. The reason I like to also use this time series, this is Ohio's annual precipitation since 1895, is to really look at these two regimes, right? 30s, 50s, 60s, we had multiple clusters of droughts. Since then, right, we've had an overall increase in precip. 2011 is our highest. By the way, we had a big drought here in 2012, but it doesn't look like the droughts of the 30s, 50s, and 60s, right? They're characteristically different. I like to look at the monthly changes over this period of time. So just looking at the differences here in January, wetter conditions, right, across the Ohio Valley, most of the eastern United States, wetter in spring. And then summer, things get pretty interesting since 1980, right? If you just restrict it to 1980, you get drying conditions across west central Ohio. So my farmers, I always say, this is your perfect season, right? A wet spring, a dry summer, and a wet fall. Great way to get into wet fields, lack of rainfall on your crops, and then a wet harvest, right? And so thinking about that application at the local level. Again, another way you can look at the intensity, this is for Columbus, looking at number of 1 inch or greater events in every 5 years since 1950. Right, you see the trend, you see some natural, well, not necessarily natural, but some decadal or subdecadal variability here, but an overall increase. So we're seeing every 5 years about 50 or 55 events of at least 1 inch or greater, right? And that's now in addition to increasing the total number, or the total precipitation, the distribution is also increasing toward, about 10% increase in those heaviest events of the annual precipitation as well. So we see repeated scenes like this, right? A lot of urban flooding. Columbus, this is just from Central Ohio, thinking about Reynoldsburg from 2021. This event in July of 2022, last week, right? 270 completely underwater, Devlin Road. There's something about the infrastructure, right? That we did, we could talk about we will talk about the complexity of that, right? It's not just a precipitation issue. It's very much a human story here. The mega fix on the south side of town, mega fixed and flood about 6 times this year. We can think about these things, and it's not just our urban areas, it's our rural areas as well, and thinking about these changes that we're seeing. There have been some attempts. So, when you look at things like 1 in 100 year flood events for Ohio, they've not really been updated on the NOAA Atlas 14 since the year 2000. And there's been some attempts to update those. We've done it working with Franklin Soil to try to look at this. But also, First Street Foundation, through their algorithms and way of adding data for the more recent 2 decades here, has shown that, 1 in 100 year flood events are now occurring about 1 every 30, 40 years in Western Ohio. So certainly a tangible increase of the risk of extreme rainfall, but I don't want us to lose sight of those flash droughts. And that's how we characterize them now, right? Last year was a good example. We had 0 drought in Ohio in May. By June 6th, we were at 78% of the state covered by moderate drought conditions. Couple big rain events in August, and we had no drought in the area by September. 13th driest fall, we were back to about 30% of moderate drought conditions that lasted through January 9th. Last year was very much a weather whiplash, right? Weather whiplash is another, getting a spam call. Anyway, a lot of whiplash. Somebody didn't like what I was saying, maybe. Yeah, so it's not just, yeah, we're increasing rainfall, increasing the intensity, but also the rapid transitions as we warm, as we evaporate moisture, as we get more water vapor in the atmosphere. Hurricanes and fronts are just going to do what hurricanes and fronts do. right? And that's what weather is supposed to do. And so that's where the intensity comes about. And so we see it manifest in billion-dollar disasters, right? 28 of them last year. The average is 8 since 1980. And this is from chapter 4, the water chapter, great chapter. They're all great in the National Climate Assessment, but a nice water-related billion-dollar disasters in the United States as we see that upward trend. But this figure, I think, really asks us to think hard about the combination of the climate drivers, right? And then the land use change and the economics and the property values. And so you're looking at flood damages associated with precipitation change. This is the cumulative, right? And now this is what's associated with precipitation change. Estimated portion due to precipitation change. So we got to think about these things not in isolation, but it's, again, very much a human story. So as we project into the future, we've seen different iterations of that, under an intermediate scenario out to the 2050, 2053, we look at our state about 3 to 5 degrees above what our contemporary, right? So if the world warms to a 2 degrees C global warming level, our change in annual temperature here in Ohio is about 3 to 5 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So 3.6 global, 3.5 for Ohio, with about a 10% increase in the precip. So if you like 90-degree day weather, great. We're going to add about 40 days, right? Sun's still low in March. It's still coming off the cold season. We're still going to have winter, right? So we're thinking about these extensions into the fall of these very warm conditions and all of the different kind of feedbacks there. We're going to drop 32, below freezing in the winter, about a month fewer days. Great, sign me up, right? Right, a lot more people staying, maybe not going to Florida or south. No, I mean, you think about the ramifications, and I do think, we think about what the opportunities are, but pest, disease, impacts on infrastructure, freeze-thaw cycles are very much a concern here. And as we project into the future with our precip, right, winters and springs are expected to become wetter with summer dryness and summer shortages or a decrease in that summer rainfall. So seasonal redistribution of the water, right? So how can we better equip ourselves from a resilience standpoint to utilize water in the excessive seasons when we need it during a growing season, maybe on a crop? So that's some of the conversations I'm having with the agricultural community. So we're assessing the risk, right? And the top 2 bullets here are where I like to start, because when we look at temperature, right, demand for water and energy is increasing. But at odds with that is the increased risk of damage to our energy and water infrastructure. And there's a reason why companies are investing in Ohio, this water-rich region, right? And I don't think that that's going away. And I think we need to think about it. It's a very cautious kind of dance that we're doing when we think about the risk of the damage in energy, water infrastructure. But what's that? How will that impact our people, our citizens, our urban areas for sure? Okay. So finally, Aaron's going to get to the key messages, right, of the Midwest. What do we do in the Midwest? Well, I mean, we have ag, we have ecosystems. We want to talk about healthy societies. We have built environments, which is what we're talking about today in particular. And also we have a lot of water. And those aren't that different than previous reports. And I think it's important to not look at these reports in isolation, but again, 5 is building on 4 and 4 built on 3. And this is a legacy of an increasing knowledge. It's really important, I think, to recognize. So our first and all of our key messages are framed around that hopeful side or adaptation side, right? Certainly crop production is changing in complex ways. It's not just, hey, yields up for, yields down. There's very complex exchanges there. Changes in the timing, snowmelt, livestock issues, disease transmissions, pests as well. But climate smart agriculture and other adaptation techniques do provide a path forward to kind of balance out agricultural outputs and environmental impacts. And that's what we kind of focused on. We wanted to take the ag and think about things like specialty crops, which is a huge industry, high market value, right? But you think about, our growing seasons are getting longer, but because of the volatility or variability in things like February and March, right? When you break dormancy and you get really warm like March of 2012, when we were in the mid 80s for a week here in Central Ohio, you set up for big apple and peach damages, right? And so thinking about those things. And this figure that we created was thinking about these ag outputs versus environmental impacts. There are a lot of what you would call climate smart techniques. There are a lot of climate dumb techniques too. And some of the things that we do, if you think about conservation history, right? We planted multiflora rows as hedgerows, right? We did things in the past, and we're doing things now that we're going to learn probably weren't that great, right? But does that mean we don't try to build resilience? No, right? We take the best of our knowledge. And I think that that's what this is representing, is we've got a suite of options for agriculture, and folks are starting to get on board and start to do some of these things, or have been doing them for a long time. Controlled drainage structures, interseeding, cover crops to limit, certainly to adapt to more water, but to kind of limit the impacts of these extreme cycles here. Another piece of art, right? And I know it's sort of a hard shift, physical, key message, now art, right? This is Tanya Bear, Ice Burst in a Ghost Marsh. And I'm going to read it because I think the statement is great. This artwork depicts the meltdown of traditional northern winter's icy streams and lakes, right? We released that report in November, and then Minnesota, Wisconsin had the winter that they had this year. But the sun rises, heat trapped by cloud cover. The river forms a flooding current, invading an abandoned building. Red-throated loons, normally migrants south from the Arctic, ride the current. Remnants of swamp trees, common in boreal bogs of the upper Midwest, pose themselves like goblins, totems of the past, part of the region's lingering character. Right? And I thought that really captured when we wanted to talk about our adaptation to ecosystems and their services. Aquatic, terrestrial, decreasing snow cover, and cultural responses there. So again, trying to think, what we wanted to do is kind of highlight some previous work that had been done, thinking about extreme precipitation impacts all along the gradient, right? The cities play an important role here, but thinking upstream, even from forest mitigation, ag and floodplains, what we're doing with buffers, reducing impervious surfaces, what are we doing in our cities? We're all downstream, right? We all live downstream. And so thinking about that in a cohesive way. This was, thinking about those ecological and ecosystem services from ice-covered inland waters and all that it provides, right? Thinking about the services, recreation, ceremonial, artistic, the benefits, spiritual, place and heritage, knowledge, activity, and then all of the individual activities that are highly tied to ice, right? We had in February 3% ice cover in the Great Lakes, right? These are really, important aspects of how we're impacted. Climate and health, wow, right? I don't have time to give it justice. I know Jenny's going to talk about public health, right? But what we really wanted to hone in on, again, is well-being, individual and community health. Thinking about, because of our historical and systemic biases, communities of color are especially vulnerable to these negative impacts. Very likely, very high confidence in those based on the literature and the research, right? But there are a lot of techniques and strategies that are happening that are important to highlight. We talked about wildfire smoke in our chapter, and of course, then what happened last summer. But by this time, the report had already been written. But these are two satellite images, just showing the impact of wildfire smoke. And we're talking about smoke right down to the ground level and unhealthy for all of us last year. That's not likely to go away, as we know certain areas are becoming increasingly vulnerable to drought, and the Midwest needs to deal with it. It might seem like a distant, far off, and I know folks here at the Byrd Center know that we're connected by distant locations, but that's what we want to drive home in the Midwest, that, hey, our weather and climate's very much tied to things that are happening elsewhere as well. We also honed in sort of an update on Lyme disease, and ticks, which continues to be a problem across the Midwest and also here in Ohio. But also, what are those healthier outcomes? And one of the positive, encouraging things that I see that's happening across the Midwest are leadership efforts within state agencies like the Emergency Management Agency, agencies to address climate threats to individual and community health in different states and different communities. Thinking about, again, these health outcomes are very much linked to the key social and environment determinants of health, right? They disrupt community well-being. We always talk about climate change as an exacerbator, make conditions worse. That's exactly what happens with our health, and it makes these inequities amplified. Built environment, right? We wanted to focus on some of the investment solutions that can help with this as well. But, just kind of upfront talking about the impacts on surface transportation, water navigation, the electric grid, dams, shifts in timing disrupt the flow across our major rivers. But also these techniques with green infrastructure and some public-private investments, right? Private companies getting involved at the local level to support building resilience. Again, I mentioned the Healthy Ports Initiative. This is up in Ashtabula. This example, there were several of these of how do we maintain the transport of goods, but then also kind of, help develop wetlands and other, ecosystem services as a part of that. You'll find a good description about climate change related factors in dam failure and all of the downstream impacts and some of the adaptation pathways there that are important, with some key call outs to Milwaukee's Metropolitan Sewer District and some of the efforts that they've done there, but also the B Branch Watershed Flood Mitigation Project in Dubuque, Iowa. Right, we can learn a lot from our neighbors as well and things that are happening in other states. And of course, this is from chapter 12 in the National Climate Assessment, the urban adaptation and mitigation. Right, there are a lot of strategies and things that we can do to help with stormwater retention, whether it be green, blue, or other nature-based solutions. But it takes investments in design, construction. It takes the expertise of architectures and engineers and all of us, right? It's all hands on deck as we think about impacts here in the Midwest. And the last artist piece here is from Pat DeRiff. Any guesses of what this might be? Yeah, coastal bloom in Lake Erie specifically, right? So Pat says, in this piece, I use paper lamination, dyeing, painting, flower paste resist, screen printing, and stitching to create a work about human relationships with the earth. I live on the western edge of the Lake Erie watershed, where fertilizer runoff from farms and lawns has resulted in the development of huge algal blooms on the lake. To me, these blooms can appear eerily beautiful at times, but they pose a serious danger to the life on the lake. The problem is an issue in many places throughout the country. And I just thought it was a really vivid piece of capturing, our relationship with Lake Erie for sure. So managing extremes is necessary to minimize impacts on water quality and quantity. That was really our key message here, because we do have, these oscillations and extremes, but thinking about surface water, groundwater usage, recreation, food production, there's a lot of demand on our water as well. And so thinking about how do we do that? And then there are a lot of federal and state agency and NGO organizations that are kind of corralling around some efforts, and you'll find that in the chapter. Again, some other things from chapter 4, when you think about water quality, it's a temperature impact stream, also a rainfall extreme for us. And again, sea level rise is more of an indirect for Ohio in the Midwest, but certainly it's something to not forget about as we move into the future here. I think key message 5, we wanted to hone in on things like stream flow, right? We know stream flow is likely to increase under intermediate or very high scenarios, but it's a very seasonally non-equal here, right? Unequal. Winter, spring, increases in those stream flows with decreases in the summer stream flow. That's really corroborates with the soil moisture in the summer as well, down about 0.3 difference in inches. So thinking about, wetter conditions, increasing trends, but drier summers, low flow. What happens when goods need to get out of the area? What happens when we need to bring goods into the area? You could think about the Mississippi last year and even the salt wedge moving up from, moving up from the Gulf. Those are issues that we're going to continue to deal with. But it's also important to know where our confidence is. We have higher confidence in the changes in the flood drivers, but does that mean increased flooding or decreased flooding? And by the way, let's add a lot of other factors like human migration, supply chain disruptions, and the fact that the disproportionate burden is on low wealth communities, right? So again, none of these things are in a vacuum. So we are adapting, I think, and we need to adapt to a changing water cycle here from a conservation and ag side of things, but certainly from the urban area. And kind of the last key message in key message 5 was also focused on the Great Lakes. We rallied hard to say Great Lakes need their own chapter. They really need their own chapter in the next and we cannot do it justice. So we really leaned on the State of the Great Lakes report. And there's a lot in that comes out, I think, every 2 years. From drinking water and beach fish consumption all the way down to trends across the lake and that status. So I encourage you to look at that as well. And I can't do that justice today. And again, equal to important to what we found are the things that I think we have gaps. Climate smart practices, there's no single solution, and widespread implementation of these various practices is poorly understood. A lot of uncertainty over how human communities are adapting their cultural practices or even their lives to climate change across the Midwest. I think we can continue to build on those stories. Gap in research characterizing how climate-related health impacts differ based on local population. And I know that that work is ongoing, but the shared realities and shared realities are not the same among different groups, especially those that have been largely excluded, right, from some of the decision making in tribal nations as well. Man, we talk about these rain events as nuisance flooding, but early on we wanted to recognize there's nothing nuisance about getting flooded basements 6 times in a year. So how do we track these smaller scale events? Because these smaller scale events could bring more transparency, enable more effective and equitable distribution of resources to respond to those events. And then ultimately better physical representation of the Great Lakes will help us. We get this question all the time, well, what are lake levels going to be like in the future? There's a lot of uncertainty there just because we poorly sort of model that. So with that, this is a link to the full report. Again, light reading this weekend if you want to undertake that. That's our link, and I certainly appreciate your time. I've gone over a couple minutes here. I don't know how much time we have left for questions, but we've got time for a few questions, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. We have one question from the chat, the virtual session, and then we'll open up to the in-person audience as well. The question is, why can't an assessment prescribe specific policy interventions if that's the consensus the scientists come to?
So the consensus was around key topics and impacts, right? But not necessarily, we weren't building consensus over what should be done or being policy prescriptive. Yeah, we offered case studies of what is happening as a symbol or representation that adaptation and mitigation practices are taking place, but it's not as though that is a single endorsement of a single action. And so that question you would have to ask USGCRP, I think, of why they're not more policy prescriptive. Again, when you pick, just as we as scientists want to maintain scientific credibility, to be an authoritative report, right? You need to be able to assess all conditions, to assess what the impact of this is, and to be able to discuss that without any leaning toward a particular political idea or philosophy. And I think that that's important for these types of reports, right? Because these are credible reports. We know that the science is not taken aside, right? And it's important that the authoritative report is transparent and can do the same.
Question from the in-person audience? Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron. That was fantastic. And what a tremendous asset you are to this university. I wanted to say that. This is really something that went under the radar for a lot of us, just the amount of work that went into this. But clearly this is a national and international impactful report. What's been the reception? I just finished a class on global climate change, causes and consequences. Some of the critiques the students have is, how do we actually get our heads around the consequences?
Yeah.
How are you finding reception of this report? Because you've done a really, I think, masterful job in distilling key messages.
Yeah. So the question was, what's the reception been like for this report? It's certainly getting out there quite a bit, and a large number of webinars, a lot of requests. Initially, with any report, there's a big influx of requests early on from media, but what I've noticed is there's been a lot of stories with, local radio, national radio broadcasting of integrating information into the local stories. What I think is really important, and one of the things that I think we need more of, we obviously want more people doing climate work, right? But the translators and those that can tell the story and lift up those stories. And so I've seen a lot of those where there are great journalists out there that are connecting the scientific information with conditions that are happening locally. I've seen a big increase in requests from individual associations, farmers markets, community groups that just want to hear about these results. And then the question's always, well, how do we engage? How do we interact? And those sorts of things. And we've got tools like the U.S. Resilience Toolkit to think about how do we engage at the local level. But getting this information distilled down to the local level, I think we need some more expertise there. But the reception has been good. I mean, for better or worse, the last report was released on Black Friday about 5 p.m. This one was not. There was a much bigger deal made about that. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it to DC for the rollout, but I think the reception's been really good, and you know, hopefully building upon that momentum for sure.
Thank you, good job.
Thank you.
I think given the flash talks we have coming up, we should probably move on to that just to keep on track. So I'll hand it over to Kelsey Best to introduce those.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. That was amazing, and we're so appreciative of your hard work. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelsey Best. I'm an assistant professor in civil, environmental, and geodetic engineering here at OSU. I'm also a member of the Cultures of Adaptation Network, which is one of the co-sponsors of this event. Research asserts that local cultural differences in perceiving and handling climate change lead to local limits of adaptation and inadequate transfer of climate-related knowledge and practices. This presents a crucial challenge for current planning-oriented research on climate change adaptation because it often overlooks how local differences in climate cultures are rooted in policy planning. Developing a comprehensive and holistic understanding of how similarities and differences in climate cultures have been evolving around the world can inform us in whether a global understanding of climate change can feed into designing local solutions. So the Cultures of Adaptation Network, formerly known as INET Climate, is an international network based out of Utrecht University in Germany, and consists of researchers investigating connections between local culture and climate adaptation to inform those highly locally relevant solutions. So I'm glad to see that we have some members joining us on the Zoom, and we welcome new members of that group. If anyone is interested, you can email me at best.309@osu.edu. And with that, we'll shift gears to our flash talks. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Jennie McAdams, MPH REHS, is the Sustainability Section Supervisor at Franklin County Public Health, a section created in 2019 that includes climate change efforts, lead and healthy homes programs, and the solid and infectious waste team. She also serves on NEHAS's climate change, as well as various local committees addressing climate change and sustainability. She leads internal and external climate efforts and works to create cross-sector partnerships. Thank you, Jennie.
Great. Thanks so much, Kelsey. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. As Kelsey mentioned, my name is Jennie McAdams. I am the Sustainability Supervisor at Franklin County Public Health. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit. Sorry. I am going to talk to you a little bit about about local initiatives regarding climate change, especially as they relate to public health. And I do want to talk briefly before we discuss that about some jurisdictions. I know there was a question regarding policy in the previous presentation, and really wanted to talk about how that looks in the very hyper-local world. So Franklin County is actually all of the green parts. Oh, I'm wrong. That's all Columbus. The gray parts and the orange are all Franklin County Public Health and Franklin County's jurisdiction. The city of Columbus actually is the jurisdiction with all of the green. So as we're talking about policies and initiatives, we know that climate change affects, flooding, precipitation, heat, doesn't matter jurisdictional boundaries. But where our authority is, those do. So we have to really work at partnerships. We have to have open communication, work with partners, work with NGOs and a lot of our other areas to make sure that what we're doing crosses all of those sections. So I just wanted to highlight that a little bit. And also with policy, Ohio is a home rule state. So we as public health, we can suggest certain policies, we can suggest recommendations, best practices, but our 41 jurisdictions all have different ways of governing. So whether it's a city, township, or village, they can have any kind of different policies. So we really have to work to make sure that what we're saying makes sense for all of those local jurisdictions. So framing that a little bit as to why there's probably a little bit of differences as you go from Bexley to Whitehall to Columbus to Prairie Township. So where can public health play a role? I've listed a lot of what you've heard about. So air quality in green spaces, equitable energy and saving transportation, local food education access, waste reduction, preparedness. All of these are climate change impacts public health in all of these spaces, plus probably 100 different more in there. With air quality, as we saw with the wildfires, we're seeing a large increase in asthma rates and large increase in hospitalizations from asthma attacks. We're also seeing some extended health outcomes really changing because of that air quality. So we're working with some partners, and I'll go a little bit in depth more on how we're improving those air quality. One of the other ones that's actually not up here that Aaron brought up are our vectors. We're seeing a huge increase in ticks, huge increase in Lyme disease, and they're just not dying. You know, the warmer winters, they're perfect for them to live all through the year. And we're starting to see more non-native species and non-native diseases cropping up. Think of your Zika, which we haven't seen in a long time, but you know, it could come. And we're also seeing some Rocky Mountain spotted and some Gulf Coast ticks coming up. So one of our projects that we're working on is improving air quality among our residents. We're actually working with the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, as well as a lot of other partners, Green Columbus, Impact, Human Service Chamber. We'll talk a little bit more about those. But what we're trying to do is study that basic air quality within our jurisdiction, and that's actually across the city of Columbus as well. We're using purple air monitors to monitor particulate matter 2.5 throughout the region. And we're trying to get a base level of where there's differences. So is there a difference in air quality between somewhere near the airport and somewhere near Prairie Township? And what we're doing with that 2-year study, we're going to analyze it with our partners at MORPC, and then we're going to really start to dive and do some deeper interventions. So if there is a difference in air quality, what can we do to improve that? Is that more requesting model policies for anti-idling? Is it planting more trees? Is it just being aware? So really we're working to make sure that as we're getting the data and as we're looking across the differences, we're also trying to get that specific interventions to those jurisdictions. We're also working with increased equitable access to green spaces. With the city of Columbus, we were really excited to be able to do an entire tree canopy study throughout the entire county and city. It's actually released now. I'm sure I'll have the link up here in a few minutes, but what it did was determine throughout the entirety of the county where your tree canopy is. There's actually deep dives into each jurisdiction as well. So it has the number of trees, the type, land covered, land use, and where there's opportunities to plant new trees. So while you may say, hey, that doesn't have a lot of trees right there, is it a parking lot? Is it a school? So we really dived into that. And what we're going to do is release those individually to jurisdictions so that they can have targeted ways and means to look into it and see where they can increase tree canopy. We do typically see, for anybody who's in a lot of the equity work, the upside down T. We see a lot of that throughout. It's where it was been redlined historically. There's a lot of inequities. I think he's going to talk about that. So how can we increase that equity throughout our jurisdiction? How can we make everybody have access to an urban arboretum? So we're really looking at those and then looking at interventions to be able to help residents maintain those trees. It's not cheap. We all know this. Having a tree in your yard from sapling is not cheap. You've got your water, you've got, maybe it's hitting your water lines. So how do we help that? And how do we make sure that everybody has that access? One of the other items we're looking at is the heat and resiliency. In 2021, sorry. We remember the large scale heat event where on top of very large temperature shifts, we also had rolling brownouts, and those brownouts, blackouts affected our most vulnerable residents. So we really want to make sure, and we're working to make sure that doesn't happen again, increase communication, increase emergency preparedness, but then also where can we create resiliency hubs in our community where if that does happen, somebody can go overnight with their animal, somebody can go overnight with their oxygen tank. All of these little pieces that we didn't necessarily think would happen in Ohio, because Ohio, Midwest, you don't think that you're going to have 110-degree days with no power. So we're working to make sure that those connections have been made and that we can create that large-scale assistance. One of the things we're doing also is increasing waste reduction, composting, and recycling. We work a lot with SWACO, the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio, our partners at the City of Columbus, to increase the amount of awareness that's about composting, as well as the legalese of it. So we want restaurants to know that you can compost and you can also food donate. There's ways to do it. There's ways that we can help get food to people that need it without, creating unnecessary concerns. We're also doing a lawnmower exchange, which is next weekend, the 20th, if anybody signed up, where you can bring a working gas powered lawnmower and exchange it for a $100 battery powered mower. But that is, $199. That's sold out, but we do that every year with the city of Columbus. It's really exciting. It's a way to get gas off of the streets, and it's a way to really start to get that individual level. With that, I think I can, sorry, it's flash talk there. Yes, perfect.
Any questions from the audience? Please.
I'm really curious about the resilience hubs that you mentioned. Can you say a little more about the status of that
Yes,
project?
it is beginning status. We're working with the city of Columbus to identify them throughout our region. The goal in the city of Columbus Climate Action Plan, I believe the goal is every resident should be within 1 mile of a resilience hub, and it might be less than that. So what we're trying to do, instead of creating these hubs, instead of saying, you're now a hub, let's build everything else, is identify where community members already go. And really start to make sure that those are built up. So do they need extra refrigerators? What do they need in case of emergency? So we're trying to sort of reverse engineer it. So where the community is already going, that's where we're gonna.
We just got a question from the chat.
Yeah.
How far are these adaptation practices globally or regionally transferable and applicable to other places?
I actually think as long as you have very supportive leadership, which I'm very lucky that we do, I think they're very replicable. A lot of it, again, is just best policy practices, making those partnerships. Columbus and Franklin County are resource rich in partnerships. So there are a lot of people already working in this space, and you just need to tie it together, especially with funding. So yes, they're very replicable.
We have another question. Someone was looking at the Purple Air data yesterday, and in the Cranbrook site, is it so high because it's so close to 315? And has anyone looked at installing more Purple Air sensors along that 315 air shed? Perfect.
Actually, that's a very good question. Thank you, whoever asked it. I should back up a little bit. That project, so Purple Air monitors, anybody can buy them. They're $200. The project that we're working on with MORPC, we have purchased and co-located every one. So every single air monitor that says MORPC_, those are ones that we've calibrated and co-located. So we check them weekly, we make sure they're working, and then they spend 2 weeks with an EPA air quality site to make sure that they're reading accurately. So when we do the project and when we analyze the data, we just pull the MORPC ones. Because again, it could be, they might not be calibrated right, they might be, or there's also, we had one time that we didn't look at for the longest time while we put it in there, and it was like every day it would spike really high. We're like, what's going on? And it was above a table where people were smoking on their smoke breaks. So we're like, okay, now we have to move this. So it's just really knowing like where those are. As you look at the Purple Air map, there's hundreds all over the state, all over the country. So just make sure as you're looking at it, not that the data is not good, but you have to recognize that they can be co-located. But it is possible. We can look at it.
And then one last kind of follow up to that question. This person notes that many commercially available sensors measure PM 2.5, but not ozone. Are you aware of any additional ozone measurement points in the urban core of Franklin County? I
don't know of any in the urban core. I know that the 2 EPA ones are not in the urban core. They're at Smoky Row and one is in New Albany. So is there one at OSU? There's not. They're just Purple Air.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our next one.
Our next flash talk is Katie Devlin. Katie Devlin, NPA, is Director of Climate Justice Initiatives at Impact Community Action. She is a dedicated nonprofit leader with a proven track record in driving impactful initiatives at the intersection of workforce development and climate justice. So with that, we'll have you come up, Katie. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. Like Kelsey said, thank you for the introduction. My name is Katie Devlin, and I am from Impact Community Action. And before I get started, I just really want to thank Dr. Wilson and Jenny for sharing all of that data. You really served my presentation up on a silver platter because I want to talk a little bit about a specific project that Impact and some of our partners are working on to combat some of this data that we're seeing and provide resiliency for some of our most vulnerable populations. So again, my name's Katie. If you don't know, I just want to give a little bit about Impact. Impact is a community action agency. At our core, we're a poverty fighting organization. A national network of community action agencies was created in 1964 as part of President Lyndon B. Johnson's fight and war against poverty. So today I want to share a little bit about projects that we're working on with a team of partners that we've titled ourselves the Net Zero Heroes. And this is a collaborative partnership between Impact, the City of Columbus, specifically Department of Utilities, Sustainable Columbus team, and the Department of Neighborhoods, AEP Ohio, Homeport, and the residents of the American Edition Plus neighborhoods, which I'm going to go into a little bit about what that is. This is just a brief call to action that Impact uses that inspires the work that we do. So we believe that the work that we do can cause a ripple effect. So one action can cause a ripple throughout the community. And that's part of what influenced the desire to work on a project like this. These are some of the resources and services that we provide as a community action agency. Today, I'm going to talk more about our energy efficiency measures, which includes the department that I work in, Department of Climate Justice Initiatives. So before I talk about who the Net Zero Heroes are, I want to share a little bit about why this partnership came together. So as you can see on this map, this is a small little neighborhood called the American Edition. American Edition is up kind of northeast of downtown Columbus, less than 5 miles from the center of the city. It's near Joyce Avenue and Fifth Avenue, if you're familiar with that part of town. But it's one of the first Black neighborhoods in Columbus, dating back to 1898. In that time, there were many African Americans that were fleeing the South in hopes of a better life. So many individuals were moving from Georgia and Mississippi and other states in the South into this area, which is now known as the American Edition. Many of the residents who moved here were farmers. So the neighborhood was, even though, like I said, less than five miles from downtown, has a very rural feel to it. So a lot of the residents were farmers. And at the time, the neighborhood was blighted. They didn't have paved roads, no sanitary services at all. It was almost kind of like a forgotten part of the city. It was also surrounded by a lot of industrial companies. And so it just didn't get a lot of attention. And so the community really had to band together and figure out how are we going to maintain our community and make sure that we are as self-sustaining as possible. So the residents that were farmers would share their crops, they would share their animals, and the community really came together. They had a volunteer fire department. They figured out a solution when the city wasn't providing one for them. So in 1959, American Edition was officially annexed into the city. There was a little bit of debate about that, which I think probably speaks to why it wasn't until 1969, 10 years later, that they received sanitary sewer and natural gas lines. 1969, just for some quick math, was only 55 years ago. So 56 years ago, there were individuals living in urban Columbus, still using well water, still burning. They're using oil as a way to heat their stoves and their homes, using outhouses, all of, just 56 years ago doesn't really seem that long ago. So I'd like to highlight that. So I also want to include a little bit about, you'll notice that we say American Edition Plus. So this small neighborhood is the American Edition as itself. When we say American Edition Plus, it includes the southern part of Linden, which is in Census Tract 7.30. That part of the city currently has the highest energy burden in the city. And then it also includes the larger Americrest neighborhood. So Americrest is the larger neighborhood, and American Edition is a small enclave as part of the Americrest Edition. So all three of these areas come together to what we refer to as American Edition Plus. And so our goal with looking at these neighborhoods, looking at the historical context, looking at the climate data that has been provided before I've been presented, is try to figure out what is a way that we can help build resiliency. And so I'm going to share a little bit about who started this, who started the work. So in the early 2000s, former Mayor Coleman took a special interest into this neighborhood and really pledged publicly that he wanted his administration to right the wrongs of the historic disinvestment that had happened in the city. So Mayor Coleman worked with City Council and worked with other local partners to start building in some infrastructure, and not only infrastructure, but green infrastructure. There was a focus on sustainability and eco-friendly practices to increase that resiliency for the neighborhood. He also made sure to, again, bring in those partners. And so this is when the nonprofit Homeport, who's one of the partnering agencies on this project, was invited to come in and started to build homes in the area in the fall of 2011. At its peak, American Addition was home to over 200, had over 200 homes. Currently, it's less than 100 homes. And so Homeport has been a big part of coming in and trying to rebuild on some of the open plots to encourage investment into the neighborhood. If you're a fan of the Extreme Makeover Home Edition, that show actually built a home in the American Addition neighborhood, which also brought some more attention to the neighborhood. So all of this data and all of this information has been inspired by the work of former Mayor Coleman, which has brought together all of these different partners. So like I mentioned, Impact, we're partnering with the City of Columbus, AEP Ohio, and Homeport as a group and a project that we're calling the Net Zero Heroes, with our ultimate goal of creating the first historically Black net zero neighborhood in the United States. So it's a bold goal, it's an ambitious goal, but this is really why those partnerships are important, because I believe that by bringing together key partners that have a focus on equity, it'll be achievable. I believe that. So as we've started to think about this project, we wanted to make sure that it was community driven and citizen centered as much as possible. So we as Impact, or we as the project team, didn't want to show up in American Addition, stake a flag and say, hey, this is what you need, this is what we're going to do about it. We wanted to take more of a facilitator approach and approach the neighborhood and say, hey, is this something that you're interested in? Is this something you might be interested in learning more about? And we know that there is a distrust of outside agencies for good reason in the community. So we really are taking a community-centered approach and doing as much community engagement as possible. One, to ensure that residents have a say in what's happening, but two, to make sure that residents are aware of any changes that might happen and providing that education so that they can make informed decisions about their homes and about the neighborhood that they reside in. And we understand that people, not programs, are the answer to true and lasting energy efficiency. So with that in mind, I want to briefly discuss some of the roles and why these different partners were asked to play a part in this. So Impact is almost seen as the liaison between some of the other partners and with the city. We have several part-time employees that are called community advocates. These community advocates reside in opportunity neighborhoods around Columbus, and two of our advocates one resides in American Addition and the other resides in Linden. And these individuals are trusted members of their community, and we trust their input, and we trust that they are going to be able to share information about what we're doing. They know their community best. And so we really rely on their lived experience and their expertise to influence some of the planning process of this. Impact also has our own internal weatherization department. So our weatherization department is responsible for providing some of these energy efficiency programs that will help ultimately get to the goal of net zero. The City of Columbus, this plan aligns with their Columbus Climate Action Plan. They also have a deep focus on equity and environmental justice, and this is something that Mayor Ginther has also publicly pledged his support for. and wants to continue the legacy of former Mayor Coleman. Homeport, like I mentioned previously, has made a commitment to the neighborhood. They've also taken it a step further and committed to using energy efficient standards in all of their new builds, as well as including energy efficient appliances when they build new homes in the area. And then AEP has its own clean energy strategy goals that it's focusing on. AEP Ohio is the main utility provider in the neighborhood. So it was really important for us to bring in the utility provider. Thankfully, they've been very, very supportive and we love working with them. And they also are open to when I challenge a little bit and hold their feet to the fire, which I appreciate. And then lastly, the residents, they're a key part of this project team. I want to be very, very clear that this is not just professional agencies. This is also deeply, deeply rooted in community engagement. And so these American Edition Plus residents are a crucial part of that. We often say that anytime we go in to make a decision or try to plan something, that communities are the solution to the problems that they face. So again, we don't want to come in and tell the community what to do. We want to inform and then we want to advocate. And we want to make sure that we're empowering the residents to be their own net zero hero, whatever that might look like. And with that, these flash talks, man. Whew. I hope that was that 10.
We have time for a question from the audience. One did just come through the chat that I can offer for you.
Cool.
What are your suggestions for adopting co-creation and just governance at community level to tackle with future energy challenges in the global South? Any parallels between those two areas?
I was looking for a softball, but that's a really good question. I think, you know, in my experience, what's been really crucial is having those difficult conversations when you're looking to partner with an organization. So oftentimes, from a community action standpoint, you know, we're asked to partner, we're asked to support a lot of things. And what's really important to me is to make sure that if we're moving into a partnership with someone, that they have the same goals as us, that they're aligned with their equity strategies, that they're interested in, you know, deep, deep community engagement, not just getting their logo on a flyer or not being able to provide a letter of support and be included on a grant. You know, we really like to ask those hard questions. And I think for impact specifically and the work that we're doing now, a lot of the individuals that we work with are people of color. And so we also like to make sure that when we're partnering with organizations, they're very, very clear and committed to their DEI strategies to ensure that everyone has a voice at the table. I hope that answered it. That was a tough one.
Thank you so much. I think we should move on to our last splash talk, and I'll let Kelsey introduce.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, it's my pleasure to introduce our last speaker. Dr. Ryan Winston is an assistant professor in food, agricultural, and biological engineering at The Ohio State University. His research is focused on runoff hydrology and water quality and performance of stormwater control measures, often with a focus in urban environments.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kelsey. Glad to be here this morning. I'm going to do a little bit of a transition here to thinking about water, and particularly stormwater in the urban environment. I'm going to try to do my best to boil down 8 years worth of work into 10 minutes. Never done this before in my life, so here we go. Excited to see how it goes. So City of Columbus has big issues with combined and sanitary sewer overflows. These are different phenomena. The one we're going to focus on today is really sanitary sewer overflows. These are separate sewer systems located under the same road, right? One for sanitary wastewater, one for stormwater. That works super well, right? Until we get aging infrastructure with cracks in both of those systems. And then we start to get cross connection of waters between those two sewers. So in the case of places like Linden, Clintonville, Hilltop, et cetera, we may have separate sewers, but in fact, we're getting a lot of stormwater into our wastewater sewer. And of course, that sewer can only convey so much flow. And so during these large and intense events that Aaron so nicely described, we will get these overflows out into our streams and rivers of untreated sanitary waste, right? A really big public health hazard. So the city of Columbus worked through a long process where they thought about different options that they could sort of attack this sanitary sewer overflow problem. You can see neither of these options are cheap, right? We've got a green solution where we're doing green stormwater infrastructure, things like bioretention, permeable pavement, green roofs that are spaced throughout the watersheds of interest. And then we have sort of a gray or traditional infrastructure approach where we're building large diameter tunnels, 7-8 meters in diameter, that are there purely for stormwater storage and provide no ecosystem services or no other co-benefits at all to the humans that live in these watersheds. So the city has moved forward, and you probably are quite familiar if you live in the city of Columbus with the Blueprint Columbus program. These are retrofits of green infrastructure solutions, green stormwater infrastructure solutions across the city. And the different neighborhoods that are involved in this are shown here. These are areas that are the hotspots for sanitary sewer overflows in the city. And you can see in a lot of cases, these also overlap with locations and neighborhoods that have been historically disinvested in. So there's some overlap there and reasons why those things are connected as well that I won't necessarily get into here. The city's first foray into implementing this program was in central Clintonville. So Clintonville's been split into 3 different sections. We completed a research project recently, 3 weeks ago, looking at the performance of these green stormwater infrastructure practices, and I'm going to try to boil that down for you here very quickly. But you can see this really hits across the city of Columbus, right? We're looking at roughly a dozen neighborhoods and 35 years worth of work to implement all of this infrastructure. So what we were really trying to do in this project is to meet the city's needs, right? To help them to understand, if I implement this infrastructure, what's my return on investment? Is that return on investment still an effective way to spend taxpayer dollars, right? Are we getting all of those obvious benefits that we want in terms of runoff reduction and improved water quality? And also, are we getting some of those co-benefits that I mentioned earlier? So again, we've just finished up this project, 5 different areas in which we were working. This was an inherently interdisciplinary project with folks from CFAES, College of Engineering, College of Public Health, among others, that we're looking at sort of water volume, water quality, habitat. We looked at both birds and insects, as I'll show you in just a second, and how those related to habitat provisioning and rain gardens. Property values, so looking at if a property is located close to a green infrastructure facility, does that have a positive or negative impact on the local property, the cost of that property? And then surveys of residents to understand their preferences for or against green infrastructure. Obviously, as engineers, there's many different ways that we could design these systems. And so understanding what the community wants is a critical aspect. This is a complex project. This is the neighborhood we were working in central Clintonville here. The green dots that you see are different green stormwater infrastructure features that were built. There are about 450 of them. I'll save you the time of trying to count. About 450 of them across 3 different treatment sewer sheds. One was sort of low density green infrastructure, one was moderate, and one was high. And then we had 3 control sewer sheds that we could do what's called a paired watershed approach, which is a nice statistical approach to see how these systems functioned. Just a few examples of green stormwater infrastructure. You've seen these, I'm sure, across various neighborhoods in the city of Columbus, and these are being applied in cities across the country. They help to provide a number of benefits, but obviously runoff reduction and improved stormwater quality are 2 of them. We monitored roughly 500 storm events over an 8-year period at the sewer outfalls, so where the sewer is discharged into the river. We looked at a pre-green infrastructure phase on the left. That was existing neighborhood, essentially. Then the city implemented green infrastructure in the middle. And then on the right, there were 3 additional pillars of Blueprint, which I will talk about right here, that were implemented. So the idea was initially, we were going to implement our green stormwater infrastructure to reduce runoff and also to improve water quality. And then the real ways in which they're reducing sanitary sewer overflows are located here. These are all on private property. So the city is spending a lot of time and effort to upgrade sort of single houses. So implementing sump pumps to keep water out of basements, lining the sanitary sewers. This is the laterals to each house is where most of the cracks where stormwater were getting into the sanitary sewers. So that lining was really critical to keep the stormwater out of the sanitary sewer. And then redirecting downspouts such that they weren't splashing near the house, but rather going out through the back of the curb and directly into the green stormwater infrastructure. So I'm going to boil this down very quickly. We monitored it, sewer outfalls, which you can see here on the left. They were pipes or box culverts, very, very simple. We use best practices. I'm going to move through that very quickly. Oh, that slide went away. Okay. Don't know why that's not showing, but runoff reduction, we were able to see runoff reduction. Move back a couple slides. We were able to see about nominally 20% runoff reduction at the watershed scale from these green infrastructure practices. It did depend on the density of the green infrastructure and the design of the green infrastructure, but I'm going to boil it down to the brass tacks here. And then after these three pillars were installed in the last phase of the project, we got back to a net zero in terms of runoff when you compared to before the project overall. So we're cleaning the water through these green infrastructure facilities and also reducing the amount of stormwater getting into the sanitary sewer. And so I think overall what our project showed as far as runoff response was a net success for the project. And I apologize that slide for some reason dropped off there. These are the three treatment sewer sheds. I boiled down the pollutant treatment here into sort of checks for, yep, this statistically got better, and X's for this got worse after the project was implemented. And generally what you can see after the green infrastructure went in the ground, we have a lot of checks, right? And many of the watersheds were improving the water quality, not across the board. There are there's always devils in the details. And there's reasons why certain watersheds work better than others that I won't get into. But post all of the infrastructure implemented, which is this slide, and I'll sort of rock back and forth between these two slides a few times, you can see that a lot of those checks drop off. And that's because we're putting more stormwater into the filters that we've built in our treatment sewer sheds or treatment watersheds. And if you put more water in, those filters are going to function less well. Okay. And that ties in directly to resilience and climate change, right? So if you think about this, if you were only implementing the green infrastructure, you think about 50 years from now, maybe we're getting 50 inches of rainfall in a given year on average, and a lot more large events, a lot more intense events. We may go from sort of this to this, right? So think about that as well as it relates back to what Aaron talked about. Okay, really quickly, habitat. We did look at provisioning habitat in these systems. Man, my pictures went off here as well. So I'm going to move forward. We used recorders to look at bird calls both around dusk and dawn. We were able to show significant improvements in bird habitat, particularly in the April and May migratory period. It was not true across the totality of the year, but it was true seasonally, sort of this time of the year as we are here in April. We also looked at property values, which I won't talk to at the moment, and then surveyed neighbors, and that's in the middle of a long process. It's not yet completed, looking at surveys of residents both in Clintonville and Linden to understand their satisfaction with green infrastructure and sort of feedback into hopefully the city's future design processes in other neighborhoods to understand what residents want and really start the engineering design process with those goals in mind. So I love doing this kind of work. I'll just leave it at that. This sort of applied partnerships with end users, I think, provides the best science and the best outcomes as the city looks to implementing this green stormwater infrastructure that they have to implement over the next 30 years. Hopefully this project has provided them with a lot of good feedback on sort of the choices that they're making and the outcomes that they're able to achieve through the process. So I'm not sure if I have time for questions, but I'm happy to take them if I do.
Time for one question. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
Please.
I know that you chose not to speak on sort of the feedback from the community.
Sure.
But,
I can.
So I lived in Clintonville and now I live in Hilltop, and I am just like inundated with NIMBYism about green infrastructure. One of the things that I see the most is people that are convinced that the increase in precipitation we're having is actually like they don't know about that, and they think that the flooding they're seeing is because of this infrastructure. What advice do you have on like getting the message out about why we even have this stuff? Like I meet so many people that think that like this is just some kind of like hippie project. They have no idea the importance of this. And I'm curious about like where to send them for the correct messaging.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think the city has done a much better job in recent times of reaching out to the community. They have an outreach group of roughly 20 people, full-time people that are there to do things like community meetings and to engage on social media around these stormwater practices that are being put in the ground. The reality of a lot of these neighborhoods is there's no stormwater management right? We've got a sewer system to provide drainage, but there's no management per se, right? Those are two different things. And so, if you want to get back to a resilient community, these are challenging things to do. These are retrofits into existing neighborhoods where space is very tight, real estate is limited, the utility conflicts are never ending, right? So these systems are needed really to provide that extra resilience against the climate change that Aaron mentioned earlier, right? Against those increasing intensities of rainfalls that we're seeing. If we don't implement these practices, we're very likely to see additional nuisance flooding, for instance, right? Additional water and basement problems, which is one of the main things they're trying to attack with this program. So I think, is green infrastructure the end all be all? No, absolutely not, right? It's part of a suite of tools that we have that include many other practices, right? So I think the investments that the city is making are smart, and they're part of a larger umbrella of things that they're doing to help to more intelligently manage stormwater in our city.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I know we're at time, so just to close out today, I want to say a big thank you to all our presenters, Aaron, Jenny, Katie, and Ryan. Really appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge. The seminar today has been recorded, as well as previous seminars in the series, so you can find them by next week on the CURA and Byrd Center websites. So thank you all for joining today, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you.